Welcome our other host to the show. We have Pastor Melanie Butler on the show. Hey, how you doing
Hello.
today?
Doing good.
Good, good, good. And we have Dr. Isaac Davis. Hey,
Hustle grind,
how you doing
excel,
today?
Execution.
execution.
Hey,
Okay, I couldn't read
what's
them
going
last
on? I
letters.
was on mute over here. I was on mute and I was about to start talking. It's great to be here. Hey, it's been a very interesting week. I'm ready to jump in it.
All right, all right. And we have once again on our show, we want to welcome Dr. Myron Chloe. How you doing today, sir?
Doing great, and thank you all for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here
I'm
again.
loving the background. It's super cool.
That's my son back there in the
When you
red
gonna
in the
be on
red
the
hoodie.
brick?
That's my son in the red hoodie. We were on a trip a few years ago.
Okay. And
Hmm
we have last but not least the beautiful Dr. Yvonne Bennett. How are you today?
I'm blessed. How's everybody?
Well,
Great,
well.
great,
Great.
Hmm
great. Well, before we get started with our topic, we were discussing in the backstage. We had a situation a couple of days ago, and I just want to get some input from one our host and then our viewers. But we had a Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp outage. And I kind of sat and I thought about it. I said, I wonder how those, and I'm going to say young people, but you do have some older people too that are addicted to social media. But how was that time for them? Because you actually have people that are on social media, I'm going to say a good maybe 12 to 15 hours a day.
Mhm.
So what do you think people experienced during that time it was out? Well, how do you think they reacted? Anybody, just jump in.
I
I think
think
some.
they actually went through, especially when that is something. It's sad because social media has become um, a way of people's life, and so before when they as soon as they get up, it's social media. Before throughout the day is social media. Going to bed is social media, and then even sometimes getting up in the middle of the night is social media. So for you
Mm.
not to have something that you're used to always doing or looking at, and for it not to be available, I really believe that they were going through. I didn't even know it was out though.
Yeah, same
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was out either until I got the notification that Facebook went down right before the former employee was about to testify. So, which I found interesting. So, by me being in that industry, I know what happens in the background. I know
Right, right.
what's
What
going
happened?
on. So it is a quick take everything down and let's clean everything. I don't care what look. I don't care what Mark Zuckerberg say. He purposely took Facebook down to cover his behind. That's exactly
Oh,
what he did.
you know, I mean, what else do you need to connect the dots? 2 points is a trend.
Exactly.
You only need two data points to plot a trend, right?
Hmm.
Exactly.
Testimony, system goes down, WTF,
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Exactly.
So, what do you think, Dr. Bennett? How do you think mentally it affected a lot of people?
It affected a lot of people. It affected businesses as well
Yeah.
because a lot of people in business, especially the small businesses, I was reading some things on YouTube where people actually voiced that they did lose money, and it was an inconvenience. It really was. It was an inconvenience, and like you said, it's not just young people. There are a lot of older people, and especially during the pandemic, if you would take a survey, you'll find that more older people now have learned how to use social media because they're locked in. So they had to have a means of communication and so forth and so on. So that thing going down locked a lot of people in.
Well,
It really did.
I would think that for you know the people aside from, and I definitely agree, it affected businesses, but those people who are actually addicted to social media,
Yeah.
it had to be hard because they don't have any other outlet of how they manage their life. Like you have
Right.
people that literally I know I've worked with people like that where we have a no cell phone policy and they can't live
Oh,
without
they
being
can't even
on
operate.
social media
Yeah.
all day. So if you're a person that, I mean, when I found out, it was because I was getting ready to post something on the show, and I was like, oh, well, my social media is not working. Okay, no biggie. That's our response. But for people who are used to literally, it's like, oh my God, they're in a panic attack right now. When is it going to come back up? I need, because it was down for a minute. So, I really, really thought that it was just interesting to find out what everybody thought, the feelings of people in America, because this was nationwide, of how they responded because they couldn't get on social media for, I think it was down for 12 hours. That's a long time for a lot of people.
I just imagine, I haven't really talked to anybody that had difficult time. Not that people didn't, but I just, haven't broached the issue with folks, not really. But when you think about it, for some people, this is their primary means of connection, and connection in just terms of relationship, in a personal relationship with friends and family. It's their primary means of connection in terms of getting information about what's going on. For a lot of people, social media and their phones is that's where they get the news. That's where they exchange. Everything is here. And so when they lose it, when it evaporates like that, folks, I mean, it's, withdrawals, withdrawal symptoms.
It's withdrawal symptoms, yes.
Yeah. And a lot of fear, comes around it. I'm thankful that, I am as old as I am, and I was born before this foolishness.
We all were.
I always tell people, even with all the educational stuff in the schools, the tablets and the whiteboards, I'm like, pencil and paper been working pretty good. People have been writing for a few thousand years, right?
Yeah.
Right. Even with the printing press, that didn't happen until the 1400s, Gutenberg, the printing press, 1400s, 1500s. So, so we've had, but, and this new stuff, this is what, 30 years old, 25 years old, and now we all in. That's ridiculous.
Well, I remember years ago, if I wanted to remember something, I would write it in the palm of my hand.
Yeah.
Well, I remember years ago when I wanted to remember something, I would just memorize it.
Yes,
when
exactly.
It comes to cell phones, though, I think that our generation has to be honest, and even older, that we are more cell phone dependent. One, because when we were growing up, we always had a home line phone. We always had the landline phone. So everybody has done away with landline. I know for me now, everything is in my cell phone. I am cell phone. I say it. I'm cell phone dependent. And it's only because the only person's phone number that I know by heart is my mother and my father. Wow, I don't know anybody else's phone number. So if I had to make a phone call, God forbid, on anybody else, I would be up a creek without my phone, because I don't even know my children's phone number by heart. I'm sad to say, but I am so used to pushing the button and I call and it's a contact, but I don't know anybody's phone number. I put my notes in my phone. I do everything from my phone.
It's 4 numbers you should know at all times. 4 numbers you should know at all times.
Go ahead, Isaac.
Those 4 numbers are your parents, your children, and your best friend.
Well, I have.
Don't forget your lawyer.
Oh yeah.
I know that needs to be on my list.
I am a parent. But a lot of people say that. A lot of people do admit that they are more cell phone dependent in our generation than they are.
Yes.
Oh, I agree.
Vaughn, I definitely have to agree with you, because we all used to memorize everybody's phone number. And sometimes that memorization, it literally didn't come to you till you went to the keypad. So literally you had muscle memory. There are times that I cannot remember a number. I have to look at the keypad on the phone to remember the number, just to look at the keypad. But I try my best to memorize numbers that are important to me. So I'll
Yes.
never forget my parents' number, because it's been the same number for about the past 50 years. That their number has been the same. So my children, they change their phone numbers just like they change clothes.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Well,
So
the young woman who's the whistleblower, and she didn't really get into this in terms of her testimony and presentation, just kind of alluded to it a little bit, from the standpoint of the neuroscience. And there's a concept called cybernetics that's all about, what you take in and how you take it in, and then your elasticity of your brain and synapses being developed. So, when you don't use stuff, there's stages in your life when your brain dumps. So if you remember,
Right.
there's stuff you knew when you were a kid, but at about, if you weren't using it by the time you hit 21, 22, that data evaporate, right?
That's
So
right.
those synapses that were formed weakly, when I say weakly, I mean WEAKLY. They weren't strong, they dissipated, and so you lose that if you don't use it. And so and then for a lot of young people, they've actually never really developed that. When I grew up and we were in school, we memorized stuff by rote. Your
Yes.
timetables. You remember that third grade?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there was memorizing stuff. So they're not having to do that now, which is also causing them some developmental delays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some
That's
intellectual impediments.
that's
And
how
that
powerful
causes,
right there.
yeah. And so this whole, the video medium, there's a guy named Neil Postman. I think I might have mentioned him a couple of weeks ago. Now you got to read his stuff, because he's dead now, but he takes a video medium to task for what it does. And actually he brings it back, to scripture, when God says, don't have any graven images, and dealing with the dynamic of what images do to our brain development, and our brain development, how that impacts the rest of us, our mind, body, and soul.
So he didn't preach the whole message just then.
So he's like, you looking at things, and then when you look at kids, they don't. There's a reason they don't start teaching algebra to most kids until high school, and that's because really up until maybe 11 or 12, they have a hard time really grasping, theoretical abstract concepts.
Absolutely.
And so algebra is abstract, right? And that's because where they are, for the most part, especially 0 to about 5 years old, when kids see stuff, it's real.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why they want to emulate it.
Exactly.
So they don't make a distinction between what they encounter visually. And then all of the dangers with being able to have this with unfettered access. And so, and I'll say this point and I'll be quiet. I'll go back to, I'm actually a survivalist and a prepper, right? And so for me, it's like, there's stuff that you never need to be without. And you can't always carry something with you, so it needs to be stuck in your head. So what Isaac said, Lady V, it's like, okay, there's some members. So what happens if this gets wet?
You're right. You
jammed up.
It has happened, and I tell you, I have freaked out because I have forgotten my password to my to my username, to my cloud and everything. And my son-in-law, I'm so glad that he is a technical genius, because if not, I would be up a creek, because I done got a new phone and can't remember anything. So you're absolutely right. We should definitely practice keeping it in here, because they can't erase what's in here. But our topic for today is because we started relationship rules. And so we want to kind of go into our topic, and we want to talk about intimacy versus sex. A lot of times people think that intimacy is is sex all the time. I remember so many times, when you talk about intimacy, a guy would go, especially guys, they would be like, well, I thought I was being intimate. We had sex, right? And I'm like, well, that's not really what I'm talking about. But a lot of times we think that it's one of the same. It can be included, but it's not exactly the same thing. So we want to talk a little bit about it today. We want our viewers to ask questions, make input, but I'm going to open the floor for anybody to start us off.
Well, anybody have a working definition of both? That's always
Yes.
that's always a point of departure for me.
Yes,
You got to
I do.
define. Okay.
I do. Sex is a physical act.
Wherein
Intimacy is more emotional than it is the act itself. But intimacy can be both. Sex can only be one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll add to that. Further distinction. You can have intimacy and lots of different kinds of relationships.
That's true.
You can have intimacy and lots of different kinds of relationships. And in some ways, you should you almost need to have some of that, a type of intimacy in all your relationships. Because intimacy is about closeness. Intimacy is about knowing and being known. So even in work environments, just the generic definition of intimacy, you ought to have closeness. You ought to have, authenticity and transparency, with people. But intimacy also really denotes a connection and a closeness.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
And so that can happen in the sex act, and you certainly can have sex without it.
That's true.
And you certainly can have intimacy without sex, even in a romantic relationship.
Right, because with
with
intimacy can be emotional, it can be intellectual, experimental, and spiritual. And so that's what you look at when you're looking at intimacy, where sex is just, it's the actual act. And with sex, you can be void of course, and what y'all are saying, you can be void of the intimacy.
And to add on to that, and that's all good. Everything that everyone said is good. Intimacy can be shown just about anywhere, whereas sex cannot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that a lot of times when we talk about intimacy, and I wanna focus more on the intimate part. I believe that when we talk about relationship rules, and it starts with before even marriage, when you're into someone, what are the stages that we go through? How do you know that a person is really into you? By the not the physical connection, because the physical connection could just be physical. But when you really know someone is into you is when now you have the communication, you have the other parts that are working, because if I can't communicate with you, then are you into me, and am I into you? If we're not emotionally intimate, that plays a whole part, because if I'm sharing with you how I feel and you are not connecting with how I feel, then how are we moving forward in a relationship? If we can't just be together without it being any type of other acts, then how are we going to be together? Because one thing that people don't understand is, what if you can't have sex?
You can still have intimacy, though.
Profound intimacy.
So I believe that, Yvonne, what you just said is that you must define where you are in any relationship that you're in. So since we're going to take the relationship of a man and a woman, or whoever, since we're going to take that relationship, I believe that every relationship should start as a friendship. It starts there, and you grow into getting to know each other through that friendship. That friendship turns into a relationship. The ultimate goal of the relationship, hopefully, is the epitome, which is the marriage. So you go through those stages. You go through the friendship, the dating, the relationship, and then the courtship phase, and hopefully that when you reach the courtship phase, that that along that time intimacy has built up. Intimacy has built up until you reach the point of marriage, and at that moment you consummate your marriage with the intimacy that you have built up among the whatever time period that has happened. But also with that, once you get to the point, how do you maintain that intimacy? That's another level, and where I believe that you have to do the same thing that you did through the friendship, dating, courtship, all those phases. The same thing must happen once you get to the actual marriage as well.
Well, that's what
But
happens in a lot
as
of,
far as the intimacy side of
yeah,
that,
that's what happens in with a lot of marriages that fall apart. They start out one way, and once they reach the point of marriage, they don't do what they did before. And it's very, very important. You're talking to a person that's married 57 years, and my husband and I are very intimate. It's those little things. It's that touching in the kitchen when I'm cooking. It's simple things. He could be out after golf, and he'll call me to say, "Hon, do you need anything from the store?" Whether I've cooked or not. Or he'll come home with a little bag of chips or something, or a treat that he knows I like, and vice versa. So all those things incorporated, it implies intimacy.
You
And
know,
you,
I
and
used
you have to do that. You have to keep that going. You have to keep going. It's like, with the way we see intimacy is fire. You have to keep the fire in the relationship. And when you do that, it makes life simple and easier when you have a disagreement, because you've built up this intimate part of your relationship, and you're so open until you can deal with just about anything without arguing, not speaking for 5 days, and so forth and so on.
you know, you know, part of my working definition of intimacy, particularly around relationships, is it's about being known. If I
Yeah,
have an intimate relationship with somebody, then they know me and I know
yes,
them. And then you
Yeah.
couple that, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship or a familial relationship, with an unconditional love. And then what that ultimately says is, I know you
yeah,
and I love you. I see all parts. I see the stuff you want me to see and I see the stuff you want me to know. But if I
yes,
have a real intimate relationship, I see the stuff that you may not necessarily want to show, but it's there and I see
it's
it,
there,
I
yeah,
know it, and and I'm okay with you with it. And so to me, that's, on one hand, that's like a byproduct of intimacy that takes your relationship, whatever it is, onto a deeper level. So whether it's parent and child, and when your child recognizes that you love them and you know them and you see them for who they are, or vice versa. One of my biggest breakthroughs and biggest joys was when I talked to my son about the faults and frailties that I have, that he sees that we just hadn't talked about. And so when I acknowledged those to him, and that took our relationship
to
much
another level,
deeper.
yeah.
But it's and so
Mhm.
one of the tasks that I see in my work and ministry and practice is that people just have a hard time being emotionally transparent, being
Mm.
emotionally naked. It's easier to take your clothes off, right, and bare your skin and bare your body than it is to strip off the facade that we wear, about who we are and all the pretense that we project, so that people don't really know us.
That's right.
And then it actually ends up being a negative self-fulfilling prophecy, because we want to be known, we want to be valued for who we are, but we're afraid to share it because we're afraid of being rejected or for whatever reason, and we don't show that, so nobody gets to really know us. And then instead of doing that, like really just bearing my soul, and being naked that way and transparent, it's easier just to strip my clothes off and have intercourse, right?
Mhm.
And so then we say, okay, oh, I'm connected, but then that's not nearly
Right.
substantial enough to get you through a storm.
No.
It's like
You
Exactly.
cotton,
better say it. That
And
is
you know
so
what? I
it's
true.
like
like eating
that
cotton
because
candy and cake all the time.
the thing is, to me, intimacy is being able to love someone with their clothes on. Because when you can experience a lot of times people are, they, in whatever relationship, they're so vague. They're so I'm only going to share what I feel comfortable in sharing.
That's what he was
But
Right.
saying.
when we're in a relationship and you want to have that intimacy with me, then that means that I should be able to share my deepest with you. And you should be able to share your
Your
deepest,
deepest with me.
especially when you
That's
talk
right.
about relationship. When you talk, and I think that that's where a lot of relationships go wrong, because we don't want to come in and we don't want to become transparent. I see what I see, but I need you to acknowledge what I see. I need you to come to me and be transparent with me and allow me to see you in your nakedness, not your nakedness with your clothes off, but your nakedness, to be able to allow me to see the transparency of who you are. So then it gives me an opportunity to say whether or not I accept it or not, because we talked about compatibility last week. And I think that that's what one of the things we were saying. People come in with all of the cover-ups, but when you uncover things, then you allow me to see. I want to be able to see. And I think it was Isaac that said, you got with someone and they, you didn't know anything about this person. They gave you their representative. That's not intimacy. I don't want your representative. I want who you really are, and allow me to decide whether or not I want you in my life.
And that's true, because I think what happens, it goes back to when kids start dating or liking the opposite sex, and they don't know how. The only thing that I'm going to say, there's times where a lot of people are taught is the sexual part of a relationship, whereas instead of being taught, get to know this person. What is it about this person that you really like? What are some things that you all can connect on? And I think if uh, teaching, growing, and mentoring young kids at an early age, this right here can be the ground where they can learn the difference, with this is sex and then this is intimacy. And this is where a relationship, can grow, and where the bond can grow as well.
And that's very true, Pastor Melanie. That's very true. That's why it's important. Um, we often use this term when we're teaching the teens. Uh, Forget about let's go past the Russian hands and Roman fingers. Let's get to know people, because sometimes people do the sex thing and they don't do the intimacy thing. They miss all of those important things, and then there's chaos. Then it's like, oh, I didn't know that. Well, you should know that. You really should know that. Let's get to know each other. I mean, every little, I like something Lady V said. I want to know you with your clothes on, not just with your clothes off. I want to know you with your clothes on. I want to know what you think about yourself, and I want to see what I like about you, and I want to see what I don't like about you. And I should be able to say that if we're building intimacy in the relationship.
But even adults don't even know sometimes the difference between
They don't.
sex and intimacy,
They
because
don't.
because of what they were taught. And
Right.
especially if they come into a family where there is no intimacy,
Right.
you're not vulnerable, you're not sharing, you're only showing um people what you want to see. So
Right.
because of this is how they were brought up, they carry it into a relationship.
It's true. It's
Well,
true.
sometimes people relate intimacy as romantic. In
Mm,
a man and woman relationship, they
mm.
relate it as, because we as women, we've been guilty of it. Well, you're not romantic. So I'm going to ask this: what is the difference? What is
What's
the
the difference
difference
between?
between the
Intimacy.
intimacy and romance?
Well, like we talked about before, when you look at just the definition of it, intimacy can be had in any relationship.
Any
Like
relationship.
Pastor Melody, when she gave those sort of definitions, spiritual, emotional, mental, all of that. Those are compartments of who we are, and some of those things, places of parts of who we are, don't get lived out in relations, in romantic relationships. So intimacy, needs to be had in any relationship. Yeah, intimacy needs to be had with yourself. A
Yes.
lot of folks
Yes.
don't know
So
themselves, don't accept
true.
themselves, don't look
High
at
five,
themselves,
bro.
aren't self-compassionate. They're not truthful with themselves about who they are. They hide themselves from themselves, hide themselves in stuff. because
Yeah.
they're not intimate with themselves, you know. And so
Yes.
then how much more difficult is it to be intimate with somebody? What does the Lord say? You have to love your Lord with all your heart, your mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as you
As you
love
love yourself.
yourself.
Mhm.
And Martin Luther King said, if you don't love your own self adequately, you can't love another self properly.
That's
Right.
right. You know, and the romance is when you're in your um oh shucks, it just left me. But when you're in a love relationship, uh, the romance is the aspect of sex. You got your sex, you got your romance, and you got your intimacy. So romance is what you do to woo one another um, in that relationship. And when I say that you woo one another, it's the one thing you do that you can connect the two of intimacy and sex all in one. Even though that you can have romance, just like you can have intimacy without actually having sex. These are things that I'm doing, that I'm catering to you, that I'm pampering you, that I go that extra mile, that when you come home that I rub your feet, or I have this bath waiting for you, or I cook for you. And those are all aspects of romance, connecting the actual intimacy and the sexual side of it. But also remember, just like you can have intimacy, you can have romance and intimacy without having the sex.
And you can have sex without romance.
That is correct. That is
And
correct.
without intimacy, you know,
Yes.
I used to teach a class on, you know, that dealt with some of these subjects, and one of the things I used to lift up is that the actual physical sexual act can, almost be like sort of like a microcosm or analogy for what's required of us to have an emotionally intimate relationship with someone. So, for sex to work, at least some part of you got to be naked or at least accessible, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need to see everybody else. Can only see myself.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
You're
All right.
good.
And so at least part of yourself has to be accessible or naked, right?
Right.
But to be emotionally connected to another person, part of you has to be visible or accessible, right?
Right.
Right. And then you have to be vulnerable in sex to get your needs met. Somebody has to touch you in the most sensitive places on your body. Right.
Right.
For you to achieve your goal in sex, right? If you're going to have a whole real relationship with somebody, that person has to be able to know you in those most deepest, most sensitive places. You really don't experience full love in a relationship with somebody and full unconditional love until they know all your stuff.
That's true.
If they don't know your stuff, they don't know all of you.
That's
And if
true.
they don't know all of you, they can't necessarily love all of you.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say that the even though you don't need intimacy, romance without sex, is it beneficial to include that in the sexual relationship?
Is
Um,
it beneficial to include intimacy?
Intimacy, and because a lot of times when people get married, that's one of the first things that goes, and that's one of the first issues that people have. They start off, great, good, dandy, they good, but then as time goes on, I think because there is a lack of intimacy, there is a lack of the romance, and they don't really know each other, the sex tends to die down because that's all they built the relationship on.
Yeah, for me, I think that's one of the reasons that happens. Another reason that after relationships get started, they get married, that kind of dwindles is, and it has to go back to a lack of intimacy, but folks they don't know how to work through their struggles. So if you're going to have conflict in a relationship, right? It's
Right.
any relationship that doesn't have
Right.
some kind of conflict. It doesn't always have to be difficult and whatever, but you're going to have, but if they're
have
not
something,
equipped,
yeah.
you're going to have something. If they're not equipped to deal with that conflict, then you get angry, and so you start carrying around a little bit of resentment. You know how it is, relationship stuff doesn't get resolved, and you still remember it, 6 months later, and so it starts to get an aggregate, right? It accumulates, and then if you mad at somebody, if you holding some resentment, it's real hard to want to please them.
That's right.
That's
it's
true.
real hard to want to put yourself out.
That's
that's true.
Right.
Right.
Go ahead.
I actually wrote this is what I was looking up. I actually wrote this some time ago, but I said intimacy. The moment we allow people we love the most see us at our worst, at our lowest, at our weakest. True intimacy happens when nothing is perfect.
That's good. That's good. You muted.
You muted while you're talking over there.
And I'm just steady talking, going to town. Something that you said, Lady V, about in a marital relationship. See, sometimes the relationship, there wasn't a lot of intimacy in the beginning and when the relationship was built. And so now that people, okay, I'm going to get married, and then it's like, well, there's no intimacy. Well, there was no intimacy in the beginning, and how come it was not addressed? But now that it's not there, it's a big problem, where it's something that needed to be discussed in the beginning of a relationship. If it's something, and I think about what you and Minister Isaac was saying last week, in that marital in the relationship, in the beginning phases of it, I like voice what it is that you like if somebody is not doing it. I like to be romance. I like intimacy. Because there are some times that people don't know how to, and in building a relationship, you teach one another. This is how this is the intimacy, this is the romance, and that's how it can be incorporated into a relationship if it is somebody that you see yourself being with or wanting to grow in a relationship with them.
And I want to add to that, because I think that the intimacy part, it comes if you build it before the marriage, before the actual, and you're building on it, it gives you an opportunity, one, to see the person for who they really are, but also you have a greater respect for that person. You begin to, that person becomes your friend, that person becomes you look at that person and you're like, I really want to spend the rest of my life with this person, not based off of anything other than we have built the intimate part of this relationship. And it's so cool because I can say anything to you. I can tell you my deep dark secret. You're gonna respect me, no matter what. It comes with a lot of things, but if you don't do that, it's so much harder to kind of do it now that you're in the relationship. Because once you're in the relationship and you haven't done that, it's like now when you find out some things about the person, you may find out you don't want that person. So it's important that you take that time out to build that intimate relationship before you even jump the gun and say, okay, well, now we're just going to go ahead and we're going to be together forever. Because once you do that, I believe that's why a lot of people get divorced.
And it's on a high rise. It's on a high rise right now. We have a couple right now, 33 years of marriage, they're getting a divorce because they never really knew one another. And now that there are problems in different areas in their relationship, it has skyrocketed, and the only way out is divorce. 33 years.
Divorce is not the only way out. It's the way that they've just choosing to deal with.
Well, it's the only way out. I'm quoting what they said. I know better.
Yes,
but
okay.
It's the only way out for them because this is what they've
because that's the decision that they've come to. Yeah. So too often that because I look at 33 years of marriage. You mean tell me out of 33 years, you got more negative than you do positive?
Well, a lot of times, what happens?
Just I saying. Let me finish my statement, because what I'm saying is this, and I'm saying this from an experienced divorced man. Could my ex and I be together right now? My ex of 21 years. Yes, we could. Yes, we could. What happened is that a situation happened. I made the choice. That's it. I'm done. I'm through. Bye. Because I told you not to do this again. I told you not to do this act a whole year ago, and you did this exact act to 1 year to the mark. Bye, deuces. I'm gone. I chose the easy way out. I chose the most stringent way to deal with the issue. And granted, so you have to go back. And so I tell people this as being an experienced divorcee. This is something that I tell people. If you are saying something and your spouse is not hearing you, you are not speaking to them in their language, in their level of understanding. So you have to get to their level of understanding so that they can hear you, so that they can see you, so that they can comprehend you. If you can't get to that point, then you need to reassess yourself and say, hold on, I am disconnecting from the person I should be the most connected with. And at that moment, I even can take your marriage of 57 years, correct? 57?
57. Yep.
57 years. I could take your marriage. At some point, you've had some extreme difficulties in your marriage. Would you agree to that?
Correct.
But
Yep.
there has been a mental resolve within the two of you that say that we will always communicate. And I can definitely say through 57 years, you guys communicate to each other in each other's language, even when that language is uncomfortable for you. So I'm saying from a professional divorcee, the two made a conscious decision to say that I'm no longer going to deal with this, because you can't tell me out of 33 years of being married that you can't pull from the happiness of your marriage in 33 years. That's a lot of days. That's a lot of minutes. That's a lot of seconds. That's a lot of hours in 33 years for us to say that we're just going to give that up.
But
And
it's not both sides.
and do it
But
again.
it's not
I'm going to
both
say that
sides.
it has to be where, because the one thing, and let's go back to the intimacy. If we never built an intimate
Exactly.
relationship, because I have seen people, and whether it be friendship or now we're talking about relationship, and I think I'm more professional than you because I done had more divorces than you. I outrank you. So I'm gonna say this. Okay? When you get married and you with somebody and that you did not build an intimacy with,
Right.
I don't care if you've been married to them for 5 years,
Or
10
25. 25.
55 years.
25 years.
Yes.
If you skip the intimate part of
Yes.
the relationship from the beginning,
Yes.
and now I'm just keeping it real. You wake up every day and you're like,
Who is this?
I really don't like this person. And I'm telling myself, I've had my ex-spouse, because I'm not like you. I can't be with nobody I was married to, and I don't think they want to be with me. They said to me, you're looking at me like you can't stand me. You are so right. I don't like you. And you know, a lot of times when you don't take the time out, you go through. You have some people that they have some patience. They just go through the motions.
Hold out. They can hold out a long time. They can hold out.
You got some people that's been together, and I ain't gonna say who, but we got people in our family that's been together for a long time, years, and they don't want to be married to the person that they're married to, but they stayed in it because they said, well, you know what? I done gave you this many years. Yep. I'm just going to give it to you. I'm just going to go through the motions. That's because they never even backtrack to try to figure out how to get on track. They never figured out okay, I get it. I don't like this person. And I understand what you're saying. You're absolutely right. If you like the person, if you didn't get with the fraud, with the imposter, then yeah. But when you got with somebody and you really didn't know who they were, and you really wasn't compatible with them in the first place, it is really, really hard for you to turn around and say, you know, I really want this to work. And I'm like you. Once I don't see that, I don't know how to build on that, because you
Right.
gotta want to be with the person that you with. You gotta want to like the person that you're with. You
Yes.
gotta be able to say, I like enough things about you to keep this going. You have some people, they only stayed together because they had the kids, or
Mhm.
they had enough free time away from each other. Look at the pandemic. You have people that hadn't spent this much time together ever.
Right.
But
That's
the
true.
day that they had to be in the house together,
That's why they was killing and shooting each other.
is, and they about to kill each
Increase
other.
of domestic violence,
Right.
I didn't
significant
know he
increase
was
of
like
domestic
this.
violence.
I didn't know he had these habits. How do you know he had these
How
habits?
you know
He
he
was
had
married
these
to him. He's
habits?
been
He
married
lived
to
But
with
him
you know,
30
one
years.
of the funny things that happened around the COVID thing, because we saw a dramatic increase in domestic
Yeah.
and
violence here in Houston.
domestic violence
So
and divorce.
people are thrust into the same household, and they're used to going to work and
Yes.
being at home with each other maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. Now you home 24 hours a day.
Right.
Besides, and I remember there was this one situation where this couple, both of them were having affairs outside of their marriage, right?
Right. Mhm.
But because of COVID, they couldn't get to their side pieces, right?
Mhm.
And they ended up having, like, nobody got killed, but they had like a major blow up at their house just because
Yeah.
I wanted to make a point, and I know we're kind of going on time. I had this couple in my church, young couple. They were like early 30s, and I saw them kind of sparking around with each other over a couple of weeks. Oh, it looked like they might be dating or something, right? Talking to each other. So so the female of the couple who had been the member of the church longer came and said, "Oh, Pastor, me and Joe are dating." I was like, "Oh, that's great." I was like, "How long y'all been talking, seeing each other?" "Oh, we've been talking to seeing each other about 3 or 4 weeks." I was like, "Oh, great." Because they were like, to me as a pastor, I was like, you see 2 people in your congregation. I was like, they make a great couple, blah, 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 family. You see, I was like, well, don't have sex, right?
Mhm.
Don't have sex right now. Wait, right? And then she looked at me like, it's too late. And I say that to say, and I'm not passing judgment on them in that standpoint, but they start to have sex prematurely
Mhm.
in their relationship, right? Which caused a relationship to miscarry. It could have been a great relationship, but if you do certain things too soon in your relationship, and we haven't talked a lot about it here and now, but we need to talk. People need to have conversations about the power of sex.
Yes. And that's true.
Sex. Let me finish. Sex is actually our strongest drive. We have to remember, we are creatures. We are created creatures,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then sex is part of our. Somebody's got something on. I hear some audio. Oh, that's me. I hear echo. I'm sorry. That sex is part of our drive of survival. If we don't have sex, we will not survive as a species. So when you look at how we created, that's a very strong and powerful drive that's meant for our good. And I think ultimately God has given to us also, as how like you have a medication and it has, it's made for one thing, but it has some off-label uses.
Mhm.
I think that sex was made for procreation and perpetuation of the species, but at the same time, one of the off-label uses is it's great fun, joy, and pleasure. But but it's very powerful, and the drive for sex is back here in our brainstem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back here.
Mhm.
Not prefrontal cortex.
Right. Right.
It's back here. It's almost autonomic for some people. For most of us, actually, when we come of age.
We're going to go back to that couple that's married 33 years. Lady V, you explained it to the T. They never had that time, that they never took time to incorporate intimacy in their relationship. And it's him. It's the man. He tolerated 3 sons, grown out, and he just decided from all the things that has transpired, I just don't like this person. I just don't like this person.
Well,
And that's how this relationship is dissolving. But I like something that Dr. said as well. When we had the same type of scenario, when you override, when you don't, my dad used to put it this way: start out like you want to end up. So sometimes you can do prematurely, and you miss, like I said from the beginning of this show, you miss a lot of things when you do things out of order. I'm a victim of that, and it really messed me up for a lot of years. Having sex before my husband and I got married, pregnant 2 months, and then got married. It was hell on wheels because we never took the time. And even back in that time, no, we didn't know what we know now, but it was a nightmare. So that's why it's important, like Pastor Melanie said, it's important to teach people this because they don't come here knowing it. It's very, very important.
So,
But
you know,
I
have a question.
I need to read Savada more. He said, I think you should be able to evaluate your marriage every 5 years to see where you are. And I just want to add to that because I call it a report card. Before marriage, you need to do a report card every month. Yeah. You need to be asking, where are we? When you start off that relationship, go back to what Dr. Myron said. Okay, we here at 3 weeks. Well, when you get to a month is like your preliminaries. That's your preliminary stage. Then now do we want to go to 2 months? Do we want to go to 3 months? But every single month should be a report card. How are we doing? You do a touch base. Is there something that I've done these last few months that you don't like? You can't be afraid to talk about it. You can't be afraid to say, well, I really don't like when you do this. So now we can talk about it. And we don't have to argue about it. We just
That's right.
Then when you get married, I'm gonna break that 5 years down because 5 years is gonna give me too much time to want to divorce you. You need to be talking every single month. You need to be talking every quarter. Because if you get 5 years, 5 years is too long. People out like that because 5 years, that a lot of things transpire in 5 years.
But also, Yvonne, I want to say this. As counselors, we owe proper consultation. That's something that we owe. We owe proper. And when we realize that something, when we get the answer to what's off center, it's our job to bring that center. It's our job to give the tools to bring the centeredness back, right?
Right.
So I wished, and I'm saying this as a professional divorcee, I have to say this. I wish that I could go back in time and practice what I know now.
Right.
So, but also watch this. The pride side of it is, this is what I want to do. And I don't care who said it. I'm a grown man and you ain't going to interrupt my peace. That is the mindset that I had because I wanted my peace. I sought my peace. So for a man to sit in a marriage and be that miserable for years, it's not her fault. It's his fault.
Right.
Because at some point along the way, he has to acknowledge exactly how he feels and be intentful with his communication to the woman that he's married to. And then it's beyond that again, and it goes back to you being able to speak your spouse's language. You got to speak their language, and then if their language is not being spoken, then you just sit and say, hey, look, we didn't make a decision, and this is what I want. We have been together too long for us to say bye. So this is what I want, and I think that we have that where we failed in the sex, the romance, and the intimacy side is because of the fact that we don't sit down and speak and have proper communion amongst each other so that we can comprehend and truly hear. Pillow talk, so we call that communion pillow talk, when you just lay in the bed and you just up the whole night just talking, and you still refreshed the whole next day because you've had communion with one another.
And it has to be on any level. It
Right.
has to be where you are not, and I agree with you. The man has to take the lead on it, because a lot of times women say a lot. They do. We don't have a problem speaking our mind. We don't have a problem saying what we don't like. We don't have a problem with nagging and complaining. But men tend to take
You can
it,
say that. I can't.
and they won't say, even down to appearance or to things that they don't like. They won't say anything until it's at the very worst.
Exactly.
And that's why it goes back to what Saveda said. You have to do a report card. I'm gonna ask you. I agree with you. If I knew what I know now, my life would be different. But now that I know, I'm gonna be different. So
Right.
I'm gonna ask you. I want you to be honest with me. And sometimes you can kind of tell. Like a lot of times, ladies, you look in your own mirror. Hello. There's some things a man don't have to tell you.
That's right.
That goes back to you being intimate with you.
Yourself.
That you 50 pounds overweight. You, girl, you 50 pounds overweight. You ain't got to put that on him. You know that you ain't comb your hair in 2 months. You know you slipping. You know you ain't looking like you did when you first, and you already know. Why does he have to tell you? And vice versa. You know, if you become a couch potato, you know, if you ain't giving your wife no attention, you know what you're not doing. Come on.
You ain't working out.
That is so
working out.
Cardio bad.
We be fronting in front for each other, and we shouldn't be doing that. That's why I said you can't wait 5 years, because I'm not going to look at you 5 years. 5 years.
Can I make a point, Lady V? I know we run out of
you
time.
You got 1 minute.
We might need to come back and visit, because on the flip side, we talk mostly about intimacy here, but we also need to talk about the importance of quality sex in right relationships.
That's true. That's
so
true.
true.
Because that's important. Because the flip side is having quality sex and a quality sexual connection in a relationship. Right. And that's important, because you were, some of the stuff you were alluding to, whatever attractiveness, blah, 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 capacity, you get overweight. Not only do you not look as attractive, but you can't do stuff. I ain't gonna go no further with that right now.
Okay.
So you see what I'm saying? You ain't keeping yourself fit enough. You on too much medication.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So we need to talk about that, because that's a value. Because when you are in the right relationship, then you do need to have some really good sex.
That is so true.
We're gonna stop right
when
there.
you're in the right relationship, Brother Isaac. You do need to have
next week. So everybody that's tuning in, get your put it on, because it's gonna happen. But until then, we are at 4:59. This has been a really great show, great topic,
Really has been.
And we have been talking about intimacy versus sex. So next week we are going to cover the sexual part. So ladies, get your.
You need to bring a PowerPoint.
We need your input. But invite your friends, because we're going to talk about it, because this is really good and it's needed. It is really needed. But until then, you have been watching Breaking the Silence. I am your host, Lady V. You have Dr. Yvonne Bennett, Pastor Melanie Butler, Dr. Isaac Davis, and we have our very, very, very special guest we're trying to bring permanently, Dr. Myron Cloy. We thank you for being on the show again. Hopefully you'll be able to come back and join us next week. But until next week, always remember, you have a voice. Bye now.
Bye.
Hey, thank you all. It's been great fellowship.
You're welcome. Thank you.